back and forth years, because that's all she could really do. She couldn't do much else. People decided they wanted to give this beautiful beast this incredible environment to rock in. So they gathered money, they got donations, and they built this environment that had hills and trees, ponds, rocks, vegetation. So imagine an opening day, everybody flocking to watch her reaction as she was exposed to the new world. The media was there, the donors were there, all excited about the gift they had for this beautiful beast. Now, people watched with anticipation as the door opened and out walked Mohini from her cage into her new, expansive home, this new world. And what did she do? She immediately sought refuge in a corner, and then paced in a small contained space. Over time, when it was bare, they found out it was a 12 by 12 space. For years, she roamed that 12 by 12 space. She actually died, never exploring beyond that territory. I talked about Mohini here in Fredericksburg, my first talk over 3 years ago, when you were at the old place. And I wanted to revisit that metaphor. Some of us have or live in or have moments of Mohini consciousness, doing the same thing over and over because that's what we did yesterday. It's known, it's safe, though there's so much more. We spend years trapped in the same old hurtful patterns by inner voices, old beliefs, fears, which become habits and stronger than any steel bars. Freedom is possible, but not when we become addicted to those same old automatic thoughts, those same old belief systems, and to stay loyal to the suffering they bring. For as Tara Brach says, we prefer certainty of our beliefs rather than not knowing. But as Michael Singer reminds us in The Untethered Soul, you can devote your life to staying in your comfort zone. That is the certainty of our beliefs, or you can work on your freedom. Each day, each moment for us is like opening day for a routine. We encounter the world, we can try a new behavior, think a different thought, explore new territory, out here or in here. Or we can do exactly the same as we did the day before. Have exactly the same thoughts, perceptions, reactions, behaviors, and limit our experience to a metaphorical 12 by 12 space and not go beyond that self-imposed cage. As a recent Daily Word said, thinking small limits our lives and locks us in the prison of our own thinking. I talked before what a client once told me years ago about his 12 by 12 space. He said, it may be crappy, but it's home. It may feel like home, but in unity, we know that if it's crappy, it's not home. Crappy may keep our lives familiar, but crappy keeps our lives small. Crappy keeps our lives limited. Crappy keeps our lives crappy. Alan Cohn reminds us that it takes a lot of courage to release the familiar and seemingly secure, and then to embrace the new. We need to cleanse and discipline both mind and body toward the end of making them more receptive to Christ's ideas, says Charles Fillmore. To enter a higher consciousness, to claim that elusive inner space, we need to clean out our mental closets, get rid of the accumulated debris, and to release the thoughts and behaviors that do not serve us. Myrtle Fillmore urged us to work within ourselves to release false truths that we hold. For those false truths are stronger than any metal bars. Why did I want to revisit Mohini? We're living in COVID uncertainty still. Things are looking better, but who knows? Perhaps another lockdown. What some people talked about was a time of retreats and lockdown. So I'm thinking this feels especially relevant considering vaccines, the variants, our ever-changing decisions about setting limits on where we'll go or not go, what we'll explore, not explore as we walk back out of and explore the world. outside our cages of safety. Looking back in 2020, how were you like Mohini? Sure, many of us limited the space we lived in order to be safe, absolutely. It was purposeful, it's not the same thing. But still, in your physical space, in this space, in what ways were you Mohini like? That is, in what ways did you imprison yourself by setting unnecessary boundaries? Ones that didn't really keep you safe, but maybe kept you caged. In what way did you limit your freedom out of habit or reflex, instead of out of a purposeful, rational safety and decision of safety? After all, thoughts and behaviors for the average person are a reflex, said Eric Butterworth. And those reflexes go way back. Those thoughtful, truly protective limits and boundaries we established and lived with the past year and a half, which many of us are still negotiating, and are probably negotiating during Thanksgiving time. They might have triggered old familiar boundaries, which in these times keep us small and unnecessarily imprisoned because they don't really keep us safe. You can devote your life to staying in your comfort zone, or you can work on your freedom. And how do we work on our freedom when it appears we have none? The book, The Diving Bell and the Butterfly, was written in 1997 by French journalist Jean-Dominique Bobet. He was the editor-in-chief of the French Elle magazine. Some of you may have seen the movie released in 2007. And in the book, he describes his life after a massive stroke. Now, because of improved resuscitation techniques, he survived, but did so with what is known as locked-in syndrome. Now, that's where a person's aware, but cannot communicate or verbally cannot move due to complete paralysis of nearly all voluntary muscles in the body, except vertical eye movements and blinking. The individual is conscious, sufficiently intact cognitively, and can only communicate with eye movements. Hence, locked-in syndrome. So Jean-Dominique is aware, he is conscious and intact cognitively, but cannot move or communicate verbally due to complete paralysis. He is able to communicate with blinking. The entire book was written by Bobet, blinking his left eyelid. The transcriber repeatedly recited letters in a French language frequency or alphabet. And when he heard the letter that he wanted them to write down, he just blinked his left eye. The Diving Bell and the Butterfly took about 200,000 blinks to write. Now, 2 weeks ago here, Reverend Sarah spoke with Joseph and his brothers, you might remember. And she talked of making the best of one situation. I thought of Jean-Dominique, certainly. Now, the first part of the book's title refers to how immobile his body was by comparing it to an old-fashioned heavy headgear, a diving bell, locked in, cut off, imprisoned. And the butterfly? Well, although his diving bell holds Bobby's body down, he says, his mind is like a butterfly in flight. His only escape is through his imagination, and he tells us that my diving bell became less oppressive when my mind takes flight like a butterfly, for there is so much to do. You can wander off in space or in time, visit the woman you love, set out for Tierra del Fuego or for King Midas's court. We might feel trapped, limited at times in our lives, and indeed we are in some ways as we negotiate lives and connections and safety during COVID days. We might feel like, or felt like in 2020, that we're living a diving bell-like existence. But Bobby reminds us one area that we self-control, and that freedom is found in the power of the mind and the imagination. Now, Mohini might not have been capable of this, but we are. It might have worked better if you used some of the 5 unity principles to deal with her issues. Be that as it may. In practical metaphysics, Eric Butterworth says, each of us has more within us. We need to release powers that are normally suppressed. For no matter what problems or challenges you face, there's always more in you. And that always more in you, because the human part of you is like a shell that encloses the divine of you, the imprisoned splendor. Who else taught us that? Butterworth talks about the repeatable Christ. And he says that if Jesus demonstrated the law is demonstrable. It can be done at any time by one who's in that consciousness. That's our Christ consciousness, our Buddha nature, where we are aware of the potential of the divine possibility within us. But so often we focus on the outside, on circumstances, conditions, rather than on the more within us, our imprisoned splendor. People often hope to change conditions without changing themselves, says Ed Fox. Can you change the presence of COVID, or perhaps another circumstance in your life? Maybe not. But if we look within, we can change ourselves, our perspective, and find some freedom by using that power of the mind. Now, honestly, COVID days were the first time I felt limited, cut off, or trapped. There have been other times in my life I've worn a diving bell, felt locked in, isolated. But those times were due to my response to a life situation, by my thinking, not from limitations imposed by a struggle or a virus, or the life situation. Times where I get anxious or depressed, old reflexes, old habits, cut off from others, from spirit. Perhaps some of you can relate. I don't know about you, but when I hear about what John Dominique was able to do in his condition, my immediate reaction was, I couldn't do that, no way. But because I was writing this, I was able to stop, slow down, and reflect, and counter with, wait a minute, you don't know that, Roy. You do not know that. And friends, we don't. No matter what problems or challenges we face, there's always more in us. Think for a moment of a time that you experienced or coped with some situation you didn't think you'd be able to handle. Now, I'm not comparing what I've dealt with Jean Dominique's situation. I am saying that I've handled, experienced, being present in situations that I never thought I'd be able to handle, help with, or get through. I bet you have too. That's the more in us. Sweet Fredericksburg community, you are the repeatable Christ. As children of God, we are boundless when we don't define ourselves by old melodies of fear, symphonies of shame, messages which trap us in the corner of our cage of our making, or in our diving bell, which may or may not be self-imposed. We need to own freedom that is ours, not look at it as something to be feared or non-existent, if indeed we are truly limited in some ways. Not allow a replaying of critical, judgmental messages, self-deprecating earworms of I can't, I shouldn't, I'm not as good as, I'm too old, I don't deserve to leave this 12-by-12 space. How about fasting from some of those thoughts? How about affirming Gandhi's statement that I will never let anyone walk through my mind with their dirty feet? Because that's what we're allowing when we think what we perpetually fall. As our old, conditioned thoughts replay themselves in the jukebox of our mind. Stop putting those quarters in. It's up to you. So, what do we do? Wait, I got it. Choosing again. What a concept. Now that's practical Christianity at its best. This doesn't feel good. Think I'll choose again. Get those nasty, smelly feet out of here. As Eckhart Tolle says, you are not the voice of all that negative chatter. You are the one who is aware of it. So pause, then make another choice. We can choose to see things from a higher place, to look down upon it from the balcony or from above the battlefield, versus from within its midst of turmoil and chaos, where our old tapes keep on playing so it feels real. Tara Brach talks a lot about the importance of pausing. To stop, notice, to be aware before we automatically jump on that runaway train of our thoughts. Pause, which puts us in a position of being able to choose rather than just react. React from our history with someone, from old messages we imbibed, or from those biochemicals racing through our bodies which tell us to react. Awareness gets me out of that cage. Being observant, being still, above the battleground. Recognizing the voice that unity has taught me is not me, then interrupting and choosing again. It is constant vigilance, being on the lookout for that which is not me, but which has been with me for decades, so that it feels part of my DNA, hardwired into my heart. That's why Fillmore said it takes cleansing and discipline. Now, I'd love to sit here and tell you at 70 years old and after over 30 years in unity, I've given up negative, self-critical thinking, that I've stopped judging, that I truly cleansed out all those nasty old thoughts from my ego. I haven't. I'm not able to commit to being Buddha Berkowitz. I do commit to moving towards that. And then when I take some steps back, that I'll pick myself up, dust myself off, move towards it again and again. It's relapse. It's part of changing one's behavior, and relapse is a normal part of the process. First is it being an anomaly, something that we shouldn't happen, or failure. Spiritual relapse is not something to punish ourselves or others with. Spiritual progress, not perfection. What about you? What behavior or thought keeps you in a 12 by 12 cage? What ways are you still protecting yourself with thoughts that might have been appropriate, maybe even life-saving at the time, or helped you make sense of a world of nonsense? The thoughts that have become life-diminishing. Those thoughts are creating your experiences, which is exactly what we are reminded by coming or listening here on Sundays. Unity is retraining, so is Course in Miracles. They help us unlearn responses, messages we've introjected from somewhere in the past. They are an undoing of the way we see, which helps us undo the caged way we live, enslaved by our negativity, our fear, and prejudices. As we automatically respond and tell ourselves things that mask as protection, but it just happens. And the Chinese proverb says, habits start out as silken threads that slowly and visibly thicken and harden into cables. In protecting or thinking I'm protecting myself inside my cage or my diving bell, I cut myself off from God, from my Buddha nature, from the source, and I'm feeding and nourishing that which is not me. That which is not me is like a vampire. It lives only when I feed it lifeblood from my Olympic-sized pool of negative thoughts. It cannot live without that. Instead, we need to be swimming somewhere else, changing the way we relate to things. For as Berkowitz says, that would change the level of consciousness in which we function. Romans 12, verse 2, Paul. Be not conformed to the world, but be ye transformed by the renewing of your mind. A unity minister wrote, be transformed is passive, so not something we can do. It's something God can do. It really means let God transform you. That it's God's job to transform me, but my job to let God in, to let God transform me. God cannot transform us unless our minds are renewed, and we need to do that instead. But how? Again, Eric Butterworth, changing the way we relate to things. That changes the level of consciousness in which we function. See, God cannot change our consciousness, only we can. Then, once our minds are renewed with the new consciousness, as Bowlby told us, our diving bells become less oppressive, and our minds can take flight like a butterfly. That flight will not happen if we relate to our situation with ongoing anger, depression, rage, blame, shame, old, useless consciousnesses. They're much more like an anchor. Author Jay Green in Not Anything Happens by Accident asks, how do we renew anything? By removing the old and false and replacing it with the new and the true. Renewing means exchanging one thing for another. This thought I do not want, I choose instead. There's no way around it. As we've said, Course in Miracles are retraining. The lessons has two parts. There's a lesson for each day. Section 1, undoing of the way we see. Section 2, the acquisition of true perception of what always was. Undoing of the way we see, removing the old and the false, so we can replace it with the new, the true. We don't have to add anything that's already there. We need to remove the barriers, to release, unblock, to unlearn our errors, as Eric Berkowitz, and then to choose again, to process life as it is, rather than as it should be. Wayne Dyer said that. To process life as it is, rather than as it should be. Even though life as it is may have constraints, limitations, pains, perhaps imposed by circumstances, like locked-in syndrome from a stroke, or COVID-related restrictions, or perhaps limitations imposed by a prison of our own making, by our own thinking or beliefs. The first 2 lines of a poem written during COVID, called Today When I Could Do Nothing, by Jane Hirschfield. Today, when I could do nothing, I saved an ant. The ending of the poem. I lifted it, took it outside. This day, when I could do nothing, contribute nothing, beyond staying distant from my own kind. I did this. So, yesterday, saving an ant might have been insignificant, perhaps even laughable. But today, accepting life as it is, today I did this. Look what I had control over. I saved an ant. God cannot change our consciousness, only we can. But how? By changing the way we relate to it. So today, I will choose to see saving an ant as making a difference. Today, I choose my freedom to choose. Today, I use my freedom to choose to see this as a triumph, as meaningful, instead of meaningless. Today I choose to see differently, to process life as it is, even though, or maybe because, I have constraints, boundaries, limitations. And that's the power of the mind that Bowlby is talking about. Or more accurately, that he was blinking about. Today, when I could do nothing, contribute nothing, beyond staying distant from my own kind, I did this. Of course, we carry those committees in our heads, those circus of raucous shrieks, sick imagining. Course in Miracles, that's what the Course in Miracles calls those committees. The voices we consider are real thoughts. And they might tell us, you saved an ant? You're a world-class loser. Those kind of thoughts drown out Spirit's gentle murmurings as it speaks to us throughout the day, reminding us that we can change our consciousness simply by choosing again, by putting a diving bell in those voices and not letting them be the butterfly that takes flight. Mohini never took flight in her new home. Although she had been released from her 12 by 12 cage, she remained imprisoned by not exploring the beautiful new environment. Those limits were self-imposed. Contrast that with Jean Dominique, who was physically encaged by paralysis, but transcended his profound limitations, reminding us that although we may not be able to choose what happens to us, we can always choose our attitude. For when he stopped pitying himself and truly believed that, other than my eye, 2 things were not paralyzed: my imagination and my memory. The change of consciousness allowed him to explore new territory and to create a book. His diving bell became less oppressive, so his mind took flight. And friends, when our minds take flight and release our imprisoned splendor, our small, familiar 12 by 12 space just may become a stadium. Take flight and blessings. And now, if you would join me in meditation, getting yourself comfortable, letting yourself be supported by the chair, by whatever you're sitting on or lying on. And it's time to pause and to notice your breath. Just observe your breath. Thoughts come and go. Notice your thoughts. Let them come, let them go. Give them permission to drift through your mind. Just notice, pause, and observe. And go beyond your thoughts. Far from the dim, listen to the butterflies that flutter inside your head. To hear them, one must be calm and pay close attention, for their wing beats are barely audible. But listen. Listen. They're telling you that you are more than you appear to be, that there's so much more in you. They're telling you that you've barely touched your wisdom, your ability to love, to heal, in your infinite kindness. And breathe in, I am more than I appear to be. And as you breathe out, send that message throughout your body. And now stillness, a time of silence, to listen to those gentle murmurings, whispering, you are more than you appear to be. Your breath, the breath of life. Let it escort you back to your space, ever so gently. No matter what problems or challenges you face, there's always more in you. I am more than I appear to be. I bring that more with me as I re-enter my world today. And so it is.